Thank you. Good morning, distinguished guests, panelists, and ladies and gentlemen. This morning, to close to the afternoon, we will have a discussion is actually very hot topics in our days. What we discuss about the uncertainty, and of course, in the uncertainty of the world, we always have the opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, in all these panelists have a different background and coming from the different country that also can sharing to us about all the view of the uncertainty and also opportunity. We understand about in the economic point of view in the world now, we have a lot of uncertainty. We know America is a process of recovery. Almost every day, the headline is always coming about the interest rate, when they will be increased. Yeah. In our days, maybe that will be not increased. Tomorrow, maybe they will be increased. A lot of uncertainty affected to all the currencies in the world, affected the stock market to all over the world. We know European try to recovery with decreasing interest below 0%. We understand the slowdown of economic of China and the gap of the potential economy of India, and also the realization, and also the price of the oil. How deep, how low, and how long. That is also impacted about the uncertainty. We understand in the emerging countries, now is actually coming in the headwind economic, and some is the crosswind of the economic. In the geopolitics, we have also uncertainty because the North Korea, in the Korea Peninsula, we have also issue in the South China Sea. We have also issue in ISIS and terrorism in everywhere. And also the growing of technology. Because of that, a lot of automation, robotic is also decrease the demand of the human workforce, and also the digital economy. Examples now, Uber taxis are actually the biggest taxi companies without even have one taxi. And create a lot of demonstration all over the world. In Europe, in Asia, even we just have last week in Indonesia. So with this uncertainty, we try to discuss in this session. Because the name is Breakout Session, I hope all the panelists will be more relaxed, and audience is also, and more open, the discussion. So we want to make it the more interactive between all the panelists and also between the audience. So that will become, the discussion will be more interesting. So I will try from my right, from Mr. Wang until Ms. Chu, about the idea, because the time is very short. We have only 1 hour 15 minutes or 75 minutes. So all the finalists only have 5 minutes to speak about the idea. I hope is actually the idea is attractive for everybody. So because of that, after that, I can cross between all the panelists before I give the audience opportunity to asking the question. Please, Mr. Wang.
Thank you. Thank you, Moderator, for the introduction. Thank you also for the forum to invite me. I think this is really a great forum. This section, the topic is about opportunity in the uncertain time. I think that, as Moderator has mentioned, that the world is really facing a lot of new uncertainties and a lot of new challenges. However, I think probably in China this is reflected as well. And for example, the economy is slowing down, and we actually seen the trade figures in February come to the historic low, and also we've seen a lot of overcapacity and over inventory, and as we have seen that in China. Also, the real estate market is particularly slowing down in a number of cities. But also, we're talking about globally. There's a lot of challenges. We talk about geopolitical, economically, and the migration crisis, and many others. But from my personal view, I think there's 3 areas from my personal perspective that opportunity exists. That's still in the next 20, 30 years, particularly for this region and the rest of the world. For example, the first opportunity I saw is the urbanization. I think that urbanization is really the greatest probably driving force for China and probably for this region. For example, our think tank, the Center for China and Globalization, and just together we have launched the World Migration Report with the International Organization of Migration in China just last month, actually. And we found that in that study in Asia Pacific, that every day there's 120,000 people moving into cities. And also between 1990 and 2014, the cities in Asia Pacific has actually increased to 1 billion. And out of that, China has probably half of that, 400 to 500 million. So that momentum is still there. That create a lot of opportunities. So by 2030, China is going to have a population of urban population about 1 billion. As Deputy Prime Minister mentioned yesterday, the migrant, the rising middle class. So that is really another good side and the opportunity I saw that I see that going to happen in China. And also in the future, actually, for example, China and India, in the next 35 to 40 years, China will count 1/3 of urbanization in the world. So we can see that is really a tremendous opportunity. So that's from urbanization, but also from China reform. The second opportunity I saw that is China reform. Since the new government comes in, the China has emphasized a lot of on the structural adjustment, on the domestic reform, and also the free trade zone that is taking place since this new government. For example, China has established a new free trade zone in Shanghai, and also in Guangdong, Tianjin, and Fujian. And also it's going to copy that to the more cities in China. So we see that there's a lot of streamline of the procedures. Premier Li Keqiang has actually mentioned during the National People's Congress last month that there's many new opportunities in terms of streamline the procedures. For example, in the past, if you apply a company, you have to apply 3 certificates. Now just you can apply just 1 certificate. And that is going to encourage more entrepreneurs, more business to upgrade. And also China is moving up on the value chain, and China trying to be labor intensive to the talent rich. And we see that is happening as well. For example, China is really upgrades university system, in its occupational system, and also technical training as well. The third opportunity I see more on this region, actually the Asia Pacific region. I think this is also the conference is talking about the Singapore Forum is focused a lot on the Asia Pacific region. So as the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned last night, there's 2 big opportunities in China. One is, of course, the migrant into the cities. That migrant is still going to happen, upgrade. But second is the China outbound investment. China outbound investment, actually, according to a report that our think tanks did last year, we actually have seen the China outperforming the outbound investment is greater than the inward investment. And that trend will continue. Actually, last year reached about 140 billion, which is very, very big. Another trend I see is the tourism actually is also growing very fast. For example, China last year has over 100 million people going to different countries, come to ASEAN countries, going to buy things in Japan, and tour around the world. And that's actually spent 160 billion, larger than China outbound investment in the world. So that is also the opportunity that we see happening there. And also, of course, we see the regional, the intensified the regional cooperation. Of course, China launched AIIB last year, and also we see TPP and RCEP is in discussion. And so I think that there's more opportunities. I think the global governance on trade and economic cooperation is really the driving force for the stability and peace in the future. And I want that, hope really that's going to continue to happen. For example, since China joined WTO 15 years ago, China's GDP has gone up 8 times, and China's foreign trade has gone up 8 times. That's enormous prosperity for China and the region. So, yeah. Okay, so I think that's probably, we see more, and we hope that we have more opportunity in trade and also the cooperation among the others. And I hope that China will welcome US and Japan to join the AIIB, and I hope US and Japan will welcome China to join the TPP as well. So that would be really great opportunities for the cooperation.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. Now, Mr. Riady.
Yes, I think a lot has been said last night and this morning, and so much has been said in the media and so much has been written. I'm not too sure we can add a lot more, but let me just say that if you look at the history, in the last 65 years, we have had unprecedented this positive development particularly of economic development. So much wealth has been created, and now the global economy is at $60 trillion. Now, and then if we go further, we can see that so much progress has been made, it seems. There's never been more progress in knowledge, in technology, in healthcare, in education, in this economic prosperity. And even President George Bush pushed the idea of human rights, democracy. So we've had all this progress, and people now pushing about environmental issues and so on. But if we are honest to ourselves, the other side of the coin, we see a lot of problems. And a lot of the issues that have been discussed do not go to the roots. The problems that if we look at today, you see the problem of hatred. I mean, there's so much hatred. That's more of a root cause. You've got so much, so on the one hand, economic prosperity, but there's so many pockets of extreme poverty. And then you've got the issue of, 50% of every marriage within 10 years end up in divorce. You've got pornography. You've got addiction, all kinds of addiction, to drugs, to all kinds of things. And then you've got family breakdown. You've got human trafficking. You've got all kinds of issues. And I'm not too sure that a lot of these issues have been addressed. So yes, we've got the geopolitics issues. But the geopolitics issues is not quite reflected in the markets as the real immediate issues. People think that it will work out, it will not be tomorrow. The markets are reflecting more the economic issues. The China, Chairul mentioned, what would they do? And it's affecting so many countries that are dependent on China. Oil, the collapse of the oil price. When the oil price goes up, everybody pays a little bit. But when it comes down like this, certain countries get hit really hard. Then you've got the Fed. Are they going to increase the rate? Even a 0.25% increase shift so much outflow of capital out from the emerging markets. So you've got all these issues going on. I'm not too sure that the geopolitical issues is what the market is reflecting as the immediate issues. We'll see what Donald Trump, if he becomes president, what he will do. Or whether he'll say that we'll focus on America and leave the world alone, or he will say that we're not going to allow China to go on their course of having all this influence. But again, the real issues immediate is the economic issues. I think all that has all been explained. The more intermediate issues are all this geopolitics, but the real issues is the issues that I was talking about. The real issues, and I'm not too sure that we should not go beyond the discussions that we've had over the last few years. And I'm not too sure it is not a spiritual issue, in the sense that it is an issue of the heart of the human people. How do you solve? Every politician says, if I become elected, there will be change, there will be change. But what kind of changes will change people's hearts? That they will no longer have the hatred. What kind of changes will change people's minds? Our education system is driven by business, so that people are ready to use when they graduate. But we know that it has failed. It has failed miserably. So what are the changes that need to happen in the education? And unless we are able to address a lot of these issues, nothing is going to change. Over the course of 2,000, 3,000 years, we've seen a lot of advances in all kinds of things. But every time there are advances, also new things comes up that surprises even the smartest people. And we're going to continue to do that. But while that happens, the basic issue remains the same. It is the problem of the human heart. It's a problem of education. It is a problem of touching people's lives. And business continues to talk about CSR. The starting point of CSR is everything belongs to me, to my company. My assets, my money, my talents, and so on. But maybe we need to think more about stewardship, where the starting point is saying that everything does not belong to me. It belongs to God, it belongs to the community, and I must be accountable for that. So I would say that we need to redefine what the issues are and go to the roots of the issues and find solutions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak James. And Mr. Kumar.
Very inspiring. Thank you for that. First, I'll confess that I'm a Sagittarian optimist, and I'm an engineer, so I'm going to speak from my vantage point. While I see, as was discussed in the panel earlier, a world threatened by multiple risks and uncertainties, there's economic rebalancing going on. We clearly have a major issue, and I think one of the largest risks that the world faces is around climate change. We see enough evidence of increasing nationalism and security risks, both in the physical and the virtual world. I also equally see a parallel world where there are large and even seismic shifts taking place. But these shifts can actually be extremely positive if leveraged well. And these are happening because of the confluence of multiple fault lines, if you can call them, that create opportunities that are loosely or broadly called the opportunities presented by the digital world. There's no doubt that there's exponential improvements in the reach and scale of high-performance computing. The speed and coverage of broadband throughout the world is increasing. There's still a gap, there's a digital divide, but it's rapidly increasing. There are breakthroughs in material science and genomics that in the last 5 years have been greater than the last 100 years. Advances in fintech and robotics. All these things are happening at the same time. And it's happening not just in Silicon Valley, it's happening in Israel, it's happening in Singapore, it's happening in India, it's happening in the UK and in many countries. So it's multiple technology shifts happening in multiple countries at the same time, I believe provide huge opportunities that not only create large businesses, but can actually fundamentally improve and alter economic structures, social orders, and also give governments great opportunities to improve governance. And governance that is a more empowered model of governance is possible thanks to the opportunities created by the digital world. The second point I wanted to make that leads me to be optimistic is more from a Southeast Asian perspective. A lot of discussion focuses on the changing demographics, but I believe that the demographic dividend is a huge opportunity for many of the Southeast Asian countries, virtually all of them. 2 points sub-points I want to make. First is, what it does create is a certain level of domestic demand that will provide a baseline of growth, which gives kind of a shock proof or some kind of insurance policy against global turbulence or regional turbulence. And that's a great advantage. You can see it in markets like India, where a 6% growth can be maintained just purely based on domestic demand. The other one is related to the opportunities for value-driven innovation. I see these large countries where the population is clearly shifting to a younger population. In areas like services, education, and so on, due to affordability, there are new technologies emerging, the new business models emerging, and these can be transported to the rest of the world. These are large business opportunities, not only for local businesses, but also for global businesses to come and not just serve the local markets, but even export these models on a global basis. My third reason for optimism is based on my close association with India. And looking at India, now I see India being at the cusp of a 10-year run, a 10-year positive run. In India, we've had a few different kinds of run, but now I really see it as a positive trajectory that's building up, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. The base economy is about 2.2 trillion in nominal terms. That's fairly large. There's very little mention of India made as a great power because of many of the issues that we throw in our own way, so to speak. But I see the base 2.2 trillion as a phenomenal platform to start from. And I'm no economist, but based on what I pick up on the ground, visiting India at least 1 week a month, I think the 7.5% growth rate will be achieved this year and probably even broken. They're looking at 7.8 is the most recent number I saw. And that can probably continue for the next 2 to 3 years while this government gets the policy framework in order. And after that, for the next 5 years or so, my personal prediction is that the growth rate will accelerate to between 8 and 9%. So an economy with a nominal size of 2.2 trillion expected to grow by 7 to 8% or 7 to 9% over a decade is going to be a great platform for growth, both in India as well as, and will have a ripple effect for countries all around the region. And even globally, it can be argued. Now, what do I see on the ground in India? First is, we're definitely seeing an improvement in the policy environment. There are certain big issues in India that need to get resolved. The challenge we have in the parliament is something that makes passing complex policy or large policies through more time-consuming, but more common sense will prevail, and some of the issues like land reform and GST bill will go through. But what's happening at the same time is there's more activity shifting to the state. The reality is 60% of the budgets in India are actually controlled by the state. So the states that are progressive, and some of the states that are aligned with the central government, are actually making very rapid strides towards improving local infrastructure, coming up with policies which are relevant to businesses that operate at a state level, and attracting significant foreign investment. And there is a competition that's emerging between states, which in my view is very healthy and will it'll lift the overall picture as a result. One other point is, with the current government, one can argue how well they're doing, but the reality is that there have been no new cases of large corruption or financial irregularities, at least for 12 months. Now, in India, that's a big deal. Okay? So
okay.
I think
Kumar.
that's almost done. The second one is on the young population. Only 5.5% of India's population is over the age of 65, and that will increase to 10% in the next 10 years. And that is still leaves a healthy number of young people in the workforce. The middle class has grown from 13 million to 16 million between 2005 and 2015. That's a huge jump. It's expected to grow to 128 million by 2025. That's going to be where the growth is going to come from. Last point, but my most important one, and it's not just in India, but it's anywhere else in the region. There are 4,200 startups in India only in the tech sector. Right? That's the third largest startup environment in the world, and I believe that the growth of India will come from those startups and not just the large companies. Many reasons to be optimistic.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. Mr. Kojima.
Okay. Well, firstly, I'd like to talk about, say, Japan. And when I was in a Davos conference in Switzerland, January this year, and I had an opportunity to communicate with the several government or top-level people. And but everybody said, now, Japan is the best politically stable country, and in comparison with other countries. Since Prime Minister Abe has been staying in his position more than 3 years now. And he announced the Abenomics. This is a policy. This policy is very much stable, and Japanese economy is not so bad. And besides, I'm very much optimistic the future of Japan, particularly 2020, and say Tokyo Olympic Paralympic will be held in Tokyo, and everybody is very much positive to invest and so forth. And under such circumstances, and also recently the foreign visitors to Japan is now very much increasing. Therefore, this is also very good for Japanese economy. But under such circumstances, I'd like to talk about the Asian economic situation and political situations. And the point is 3. 3 points is, first one is TPP. The second one is infrastructure investments. And number 3 is the innovation. Those 3 words is related to the political and economic situation in Asia, including, of course, Japan. Well, TPP is talking about TPP because this is, I think, very, very important. And as you may know, TPP will stimulate economic activity among the Singapore, Japan, and other member countries, and will continue to the further prosperity of all participants. There might be some twists and turns before TPP agreement comes into effect, but I do hope lower tariffs and further evolution of international supply chains will have a very much positive effect on business in the near future. In order to facilitate Asia's further growth, we call for the elimination of unnecessary regulations and the liberalization of trade and investment rules. We have high expectation for regional comprehensive partnerships, not just TP, but also RCEP and FTAP. We are very much confident that these initiatives will contribute greatly to the building of efficient production systems throughout the regions. This is very good issues. The number 2, infrastructure investment. Infrastructure investment improves the flow of people, flow of goods, and the flow of capital. It therefore accelerates economic growth and social development. The following 3 points are particularly important in Asian infrastructure investment. Number 1, protection of the environment and the benefit to local communities. And also, number 2, sustained long-term development. Number 3, soft infrastructure such as human resource development. Not only hardware infrastructure, but the soft infrastructure is very, very important. And the infrastructure is a very much long-term things. This means long-term issues need to be considered, and these include the aging of the infrastructure, the future running cost, and demographic change. Also, very important issue is we should focus not only on hard infrastructure, but also on improving education and other soft infrastructure that contributes greatly to the local communities. Therefore, number 1, number 2, TPP and infrastructure, and now the third one was the innovation. Asia is becoming the innovation center of the world, I do believe. I am a member of the advisory council for the mayor of the Shanghai governor, and have discussions with the mayor every year. The agenda of last year was about that what Shanghai should be in order to become a world-leading innovation center, and we had a very fruitful discussion at that time. maximizing the use of IoT, the Internet of Things, and big data is very, very important for now. I think that application of IoT and big data in infrastructure is also one of the keys for Asia's sustainable growth. Japan has already successfully used this IoT and the big data in its transportation systems and also supply chain management system. I do believe that IoT and the big data would be also very helpful for the continued growth of emerging countries. Therefore, those things are very, very important in Asia. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize the importance of mutual communications for Asia, stability and economic prosperity. When we develop a new business in a country or region, we first build relationships with local companies and also local governments that know the local business environment. This approach is very much important, particularly in Asia, which consists of many diverse culture and social systems. In order to build this very strong and lasting relationship between countries, we need to frankly exchange news on a regular basis, whether it is on a private or government level.
Mr. Kojima.
Yeah, another 5 minutes. No, not minutes. It is very much my sincerest hope that the governments in Asia work to reduce geopolitical risks through such a means. Important is communication and frankly talking about between, say, Asian countries. Of course, Japan will be involved. This will create the future business development and the future very much successful, businesses and so forth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. I'm honored to participate in the Singapore Forum and on this panel today on opportunities and challenges. As the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce, we're a global organization headquartered in Paris. We've been there for almost 100 years and represent almost 6 million members in over 100 countries throughout the world. The mission of the International Chamber of Commerce is to promote international trade, responsible business, and global approaches to regulations through advocacy and through our standard-setting policies and through our International Court of Arbitration and commercial dispute resolution services. I'd like to address one principal issue that is central to the work of the ICC and one which neatly encapsulates the theme of opportunities and challenges, and that is specifically the outlook for global trade. Just 2 years ago, trade flows were predicted to grow 7% in 2015. But in fact, as we know, global trade effectively flatlined last year, with world trade falling in goods by over 10%. Over the past 2 decades, trade has been a powerful driver of GDP growth and job creation. So we must not accept sluggish trade as the new status quo. Less trade means lower growth, less employment, and fewer opportunities for the world's poorest to escape poverty. It's therefore vital that we as business and government work together to constructively reinvigorate trade and to address the head-on challenge of weak growth and to unlock latent opportunities in Asia and elsewhere in the global economy. A good starting point is to think small, by which I mean to think about promoting small business growth. Globally, 95% of enterprises are SMEs, representing 60% of the private sector jobs. In Asia, SMEs play an even more important role in promoting employment and social cohesion, accounting for around 70% of employment in the Asia region. SMEs are therefore centrally positioned in government efforts to remedy the almost chronic problems of sluggish global growth and record levels of unemployment. And that means focusing on the capacity of small businesses to access global markets. In Asia, despite their overwhelming contribution to employment, SMEs are responsible for only 30% of direct exports. To enhance that position, we need 2 immediate priorities. The first is the financing of small businesses. Without financing, companies cannot grow and hire new people. The enormous potential of small businesses is being held back by limited access to responsibly priced finance. For example, SMEs can only rely on bank credit to allow them to export, but new ICC data shows that over 50% of SME applications for trade finance are now turned down by banks. The Asia Development Bank estimates that there is currently a US dollar 1.4 trillion shortfall in trade finance globally, over 900 billion of which is in the developing Asian markets alone. SMEs, which typically have little access to alternative forms of financing, are clearly suffering most acutely from this gap. Banks need to be prudent, and financial regulation is, quite frankly, more demanding today than it was before the financial heart attack of 2008. But if governments are serious about supporting growth, we must urgently help deserving businesses get financing for their operations. A useful starting point will be for governments, in particular the G20, to explore whether tougher financial regulation has inadvertently stymied the flow of assistance to small businesses, and if so, to remove those impediments. The second priority must be to make it easier for SMEs to trade across borders. Red tape at borders, such as excessive or complex paperwork, places a significant brake on trade in many countries, discouraging SMEs from entering overseas markets. World Bank research shows that the longer it takes to get goods across borders, the more exporting is dominated by large firms. Singapore is a world leader when it comes to facilitating trade. It takes, after all, only 2 days on average to clear a container through Singaporean customs, compared to several weeks in many other countries. The good news is that there is a ready solution to this problem at hand. The World Trade Organization's Trade Facilitation Agreement, which was agreed in 2013, but has only been ratified by 72 countries to date, could have a transformational impact on the abilities of SMEs to access global markets by reducing unnecessary red tape at borders. Governments need to do all they can to speed the implementation of the Trade Facilitation Agreement, which the ICC research suggests could more than double SME exports, creating 21 million jobs in the process. Trade facilitation is particularly important as the internet makes it easier for buyers and sellers to connect. Research shows that over 90% of commercial sellers on eBay export, compared to just 15% in the offline economy. In this context, trade facilitation reforms to make trade easier, simpler, and less costly have significant potential to unleash new waves of SME exports, enabling small businesses to export in unprecedented numbers in a way that could fundamentally change the composition of global trade. These two issues, the availability of trade finance and the need to speed implementation of the Trade Facilitation Agreement, are very much at the heart of ICC's advocacy in this year's G20 process, with the aim of securing global commitments to revitalize trade as a driver for growth, job creation, and opportunity to all. I want to make two brief comments, one about the ICC's commitment to Singapore, and in particular, our joint venture, if we can call it that, between the ICC and International Enterprise Singapore, i.e. Singapore. We have created an academy here in Singapore it's an e-platform for learning, at this present point dedicated to trade finance and the banking industry. We have over 70 courses which are being taught in that particular area, but we will shortly expand into taxation, maritime activities, anti-corruption, et cetera. This is the beginning of a strong relationship between the ICC and IES and Singapore in general, and we hope to extend that collaboration as we go forward. Not only one brief point. The figure 75 years has been mentioned here quite often, and I share the optimism of Vinod, but also the optimism of the progress that has been made in health, education, government, and general progress of humanity in the last 65 years. 65 years ago, I was born on June 25th, 1950, which for Korea is a very important date. That's the day the Korean conflict began. In San Francisco, when my mother woke up that morning after I was born, she read the newspapers about this conflict and was very happy that her baby son would not have to participate in any wars. Well, the world isn't quite so simple, but whether you're a caveman counting how many rocks you have, or you're in the nuclear age counting how many nukes you have, the important thing is to avoid using them. And all the comments that have been made today about geopolitics and geoeconomics and the momentary issues we have about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and One Belt, One Road, however you may view those as geopolitical instruments, the point is to expand our economies, to increase free trade, and to avoid conflict.
Thank you, John. It's you?
I think I share the views of most of the panelists here. I'm very optimistic. I think what we should understand is that uncertainty does not mean disaster. Uncertainty is very discomforting because we're going through huge changes. But if you think about it, there are a lot of opportunities. Even as China is trying to restructure her economy, it's obvious she's trying to build institutions, she's trying to create stability, and should China succeed, and right now we have no reason to believe they won't, there's a whole region of prosperity. We're going to see increased globalization and trade, which in turn will prosper many in this region. I think Vinod has mentioned how India is growing, and I think that's very that gives cause for optimism. I think the other thing that we are all grappling with, but over the long term should be good for us, are all the new technologies out there, from 3D printing to artificial intelligence to Internet of Things. We have not figured out how to harness all these technologies, but I believe it's a matter of time before businesses do. And if that happens, there's another new age where people will be, demanding these new products, and we will again prosper. So from a business perspective, I think this uncertainty provides many opportunities. The difficulty is where we all come from and our different vantage points. If you are an incumbent in a big business, you have a lot of legacy. If you are a bank and you look at Alibaba taking money from every small guy and lending it, you know your business model has to change. How are you going to change? If you are running hotels, you see Airbnb, you've got to figure out how you've got to change. So I think the challenge is for incumbents, big incumbents, to figure out how they need to transform themselves. For the SMEs, you see a lot of the governments working very hard to prosper them. That gives cause for optimism. Interestingly, it's the new technologies and the uncertainties that give these SMEs a lot of opportunity. There are going to be winners and losers in this game, but there always have been winners and losers in this game. That's my view.
Thank you, Ms. Chu. Now we have another 30 minutes in the show. Yeah, and before I give the opportunity to audience to ask, now I try to asking to all panelists about all your ideas coming. Yeah, but please answer straight to the point, 1 minute maximum. Yeah, the answers of all the panelists. Mr. Wang, you're talking about everything is opportunity, right? About the China reform, about everything. My question is, what is the main challenge of China, with situation of slowdown economic? Please.
Thank you. I think the challenge of China right now is really, for example, since China now coming so long after 30 years, 35 years of opening up, the economy is in great transition now, and I think the middle income trap could be really the biggest challenge actually China faces. You look at all the other emerging economy when they reached 8,000, 7,000, 8,000 GDP per capita, and then when you're trying to cross the 10,000 threshold, that's where all the challenges come. So China has such a big size and population. So I think that's really for China to really to tackle that. I think recently we see the trade has been slowing down. We see a lot of cities has bubbles in the real estate, and we also see of course we have quite a lot of domestic and international tensions. So I think that, really, if the government really to deepen the reform and also to continue to the open door policy, and that the opportunity will arise. I think that policy of opening up continuously and deepen reform, and also build a prosperity shared by all the countries in the region is really the key for for the transformation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wang. Pak James, you coming with the business community, but you come with the different perspective. It's the first time I saw Pak James coming with different perspective about the uncertainty now coming more fundamentals than whatever we discussed for the time being. About the inequality, about the family values, about the drugs, about the democracy. And with that is how we can handle it. Are you optimist in the future about this one? And do you think this will be becoming the opportunity?
Yeah.
1 minute.
Yeah, I think we need to look at both sides of the coin. On the one side, the global economy is 60 plus trillion. In the next 30 years, it will add another 60, 90, maybe 100 trillion dollars. Now, wealth creation is about at least 2 times, if not 3 times, of the GDP. So that means there's so much wealth to be gained. And people that are well educated, they've got a good system to good work ethics, they've got capital, they've got all that, they've got access to the capital, they're going to do well. But the question is, can you do well, make a lot of money, but yet also sensitive about the other side of the coin, all those issues. The issues that are immediate, the issues that are at the roots, and the issues that are about inclusiveness. So I think, to me, that is the issue. The quantitative growth will be there. The issue is, the question is, will there be qualitative growth? So if the qualitative infrastructure is not there, the growth will be slower. So if we can participate, and yet at the same time, not just think about making money, but think about how can we be part of the solution to address all those other issues, then that is where the real joy comes. So you need to come in with education. You need to come in with a different sense of how do you transform and impact more remote areas, for instance. So, and then all these technology are there already. And how can you be a part to take part of all that new wealth creation, but at the same time coming in from a different perspective?
Okay, thank you, Pak James. Mr. Kumar, you're talking about a lot of technology, about the bonus demography in Southeast Asia, but you're talking also about India, yeah, about India will be a lot of potential, but a lot of challenge. So they have a gap, big gap there. And what do you think is the government of India have to do to reduce the gap and to meet between the potential and also the realization?
Well, there's a lot to do, so let's try and narrow this down. First, I think the recent budget, in my view, it was a good one because it addresses rural India, it addresses people in the bottom half of the pyramid. And with a country like India, unless you make efforts to bridge those gaps, you will not have sustainable growth and you will not have qualitative growth. We will have many social issues that will come in the way of economic growth later on. Big businesses would like to see greater policy changes that enable big business growth very rapidly. But I think even for big businesses in the long run to have sustained growth, policies have to enable greater wealth distribution and especially creation of infrastructure and education and healthcare that reaches the poorer people in the country. And that's nearly half the country. And that is going to require a few budgets, in my view, of making sure there's what some would argue is disproportionate allocation of funds to these causes, which are longer term. I think that's important. And the other one is around skills and education. We have a major revamp that's required in the educational system and skill development in the country because we have large populations of young people coming into the workforce every single year. Unless they come with the skills that are relevant to what businesses need, and not all of it is a college education. We need much more relevant vocational education, for example. So those are the two things I would say the government should focus on in order to make sure that the growth is sustainable.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kumar. Mr. Kojima.
Yes.
You believe about the future of Japan, your optimism about Japan, and also with the TPP, with infrastructures, and also with innovation. My question, we understand about the aging population in Japan. Yeah, you decrease the population every years. Yeah, you will be moved the economic from GDP point of view to become GNP strategy. And what is the action is actually the company in Japan, you are honorary chairman of Mitsubishi, going forward to transform from the GDP to the GNP economy?
Very good questions. I myself is also very old. Then the aging population is a very serious problem, and also decreasing the birth rate is also another problem. And say sometimes our total population will be decreasing. However, under such circumstances, and of course, and we try to develop our business outside Japan, and also how to collaborate with Asian countries, people. And when I visited the Philippines, say several months ago, I was told that the Philippines' total population will be increasing and will be over Japan in a couple of years. That was told by the Philippines. Therefore, younger generation should collaborate, communicate to each other, and not only say Asian countries, but throughout the world. That's a very important policy. Then Prime Minister Abe seriously think about that, and he always said, in Japan at least 100 million people should how to collaborate and increase in Japanese economy level, GDP, GNP. And therefore, government and private companies has same problems. Will understand what the problem is. And we are now communicating very closely with each other, how to do it in the future.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kojima. John, you as a Secretary General, will be responsibility about the increasing about trade, investment, and so on, right? So it's actually, you're talking about 2015, the global trade is relatively flat. And are you optimistic about 2016 that we increase the global trade in 2017? If you're optimist, why are you optimist?
I think the immediate prospects for trade are not particularly positive, but that does not necessarily mean that the medium and longer term prospects are not good. And I think that the various efforts that we're making internationally with regards to free trade, in the various forms that free trade exists, and I say that in a form written very large without being specific. We all know what the specifics are, but in a very broad sense, to believe in trade, to believe in free trade for the long expanse of history, whether it's the Phoenicians in the Mediterranean or the Romans or the Chinese 500 years ago, or all of the world today now concentrating on regional and global trade and free trade, we have to believe that that is the engine which produces prosperity, which produces jobs, which produces growth. I think in a larger sense, the irresponsibility of business, for which we all bear a burden in times gone by, is past. And the focus that we now have on what used to be called corporate social responsibility, which is now called perhaps in a better way sustainable and qualitative growth, which ties into the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, which ties into the climate agreement reached in Paris in December, the COP21. If we can't survive on our climate as a population, if the middle class in China cannot prosper and grow, if wages cannot be at a proper level in the United States so that our middle class, which has dropped significantly in income over the last 25 years relative to where it was in terms of its purchasing power, if we cannot sustain our middle classes, what happens to us at the top of the pyramid is irrelevant. Because if the rest of the world cannot survive, if our governments cannot survive in dealing with our social problems, and we all have them to a large extent, whether it's in India or China or the United States or in Europe, all of the problems that we have need to be really concentrated on. Business now plays a role in that, and a significant role in it. We did in COP21, in the climate agreement, we will in COP22, this year in Marrakesh. We are the voice of business for the SDGs. So in terms of our participation in that, in a specific sense on those specific subjects, but in a larger sense with regards to trade, business is very much present there.
Okay. The last one, Ms. Chiu. you're talking about in uncertainty, they have always the opportunity. Especially you come from Singapore. What do you think in Southeast Asia? Are you optimist with that? And why are you optimist? And the second, my question, because you are Singaporean, yeah, what kind of Singapore can do for Southeast Asia?
Sorry, what kind of...
What kind Singapore, yeah, because Singapore is actually the wealthiest countries in Southeast Asia. What do you think Singapore can do for Southeast Asia, to development Southeast Asia?
I think the starting point, the one is why am I optimistic about Southeast Asia? Why? Okay. I think Southeast Asia is actually in an interesting spot from this morning's discussion because of the changing geopolitical power. And I think most people will agree that there's a lot of power coming up from China. But the One Belt, One Road, China certainly wants to be involved with Southeast Asia, and I think Southeast Asia is a natural beneficiary. This is not to say that it will be a smooth situation. There are bound to be some people upset, there'll be countries upset, but over the longer term, I think there is a general preference for peace and prosperity, so I think that will work. As to what Singapore can do for Southeast Asia, I think it's a question better put to the policy makers rather than to a business person. I can only hope that as one of the rich countries in the region, we contribute, by providing not just financial help, but as a role model. And I dare say that some our leaders are already trying to do that. We have a Temasek Foundation, they're giving money. We're trying to serve as a platform, just like today, where we can provide a platform for easy discussion. We try to be as neutral as possible so that it's a comfortable place to share and exchange different views. We also have a very, very good educational institutions, and we're trying to send our people out. Of course, that's a bit sensitive. Do you send your people out? Do you keep them here? But I think by sending our people out, I like to think we are also contributing.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Chu. Now we have another 18 minutes to give the floor. Now I will give the opportunity to 3 first questions. Yeah. So please raise your hand if you want to asking some question. If you want to also argue, yeah, about the idea, whatever the panelists share, that is also okay. The first one, the second one, and the third one. And we can, if we have a time, we can have another one. Please, goes directly straight to the point.
My name is Shubrata Mitra. I'm the director of the Institute of South Asian Studies of the NUS. I would like to thank Mr. Vinod Kumar for that robustly optimistic view of India's prospects. We have not heard a lot about India in this conference, so thank you very much for that. I would have 3 questions for you. In India-China comparison, does one get the impression that India is isolating herself? Is there an Indian equivalent of the OBOR? Is India doing anything to connect herself to South Asian economies and politics? And most important of all, as we learned from Mr. Rajamohan this morning, China is not just joining the high table of international politics. China is rewriting the rules to create new opportunities for China. Is India doing anything on those lines? Or is India simply emerging to a world which is already there?
Thank you. Second one.
Thank you. My name is Yasu Ota. I'm a journalist with Nikkei, a Japanese media, and I'm in charge of the opinion page of Nikkei Asian Review, the English media. And my question is about the trade liberalization. As Mr. Danilovich and Mr. Kojima mentioned, it's quite important, I think, for the economic growth of Asia to have the free trade. But as a reporter, I have supported TPP and RCP and all other trade liberalization program. But the more I write stories, I sense the more we have a repercussion from local community or the incumbent as the state-owned enterprises who had a benefit from the status quo. So this may have something to do with Mr. Riady mentioned, the gap or inequality in the society or family breakdown. So I'm just wondering how we can overcome this. The more we talk about the free trade, the more we hear the opposition voices. This is something we have to tackle.
Okay, thank you. The third one, please.
My name is Naoki Shibuya from Japan. Thank you very much for a great panelist and moderator. My question relates to innovation and the downside of innovation. Actually, I do share the optimism of the Mr. Kumar and Mr. Chu about the innovation, what innovation can do to our lives in the future. But also there is, especially as to the robotics and AIs, there is a downside, which is the negative impact to employment and jobs. And what do you think about how we should transform our society to adjust to those negative impacts? Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Mr. Kumar first.
Okay. I'm not a policy wonk, so I can't really give you great insights into the policies. But from my perspective, I don't think it's a battle for center stage between India and China, because I think, frankly, China is a much larger power than India, and India will play an important role. But I don't think, even from an Indian perspective, it should be viewed as how do we counter what China is doing. However, there is a need for India to be more active in the global stage. And Prime Minister Modi, if you've seen his actions ever since he came to office, has been very active in establishing India's presence around the world and to strengthen key relationships, including the way he reached out to Pakistan, for example, was quite impressive in my view. And I think that's a process. The difference, though, between from how I understand it, rather than big, bold moves, India will make a series of smaller moves and strengthen relationships with many powers around the world, rather than take very hard positions. And in the world that we're dealing with, maybe that's a better approach and less confrontational approach and less divisive approach. Again, the other aspect that we need to take into account is India exercises a lot of soft power. If you look at the diaspora of India, the presence around the world, the role they play in large businesses and policy institutions around the world is fairly significant. And that's quite dispersed. It's been growing for a long period of time, and I believe that has a role to play as well. And this is something that is emerging, will emerge organically, and will have a contribution to make to India's role in the world. And the last point really is India is the world's largest democracy. And the power of the democracy, and that eventually the right thing will happen even in India, is something that's a testament to democracy. And there will be countries around the world that try to emulate that as we shift more towards the need for inclusive growth. That's how I see India's role playing out in the world. And if you look at the actions that many countries are taking, India is being used as a foil to China's power in the strategy of various countries. And therefore, that's the other way. Whether India goes out or not, India will be dragged into some of these geopolitical theaters. That's my commentary on India. On the point of innovation, since I'm sort of in the middle of artificial intelligence and robotics, because of the business that we're in, I'm optimistic that artificial intelligence and robotics, in fact, will not reduce the number of jobs, but find new ways to get integrated into the way business is done and the way we live, and will aid many of the challenges that we face from a demographic and social perspective. In Japan, for example, we're already seeing the important role human-friendly robots are playing to assist in elderly care and elderly living, and the range of services that robots can provide is steadily increasing. Therefore, I see it very much as complementary. And even in the case of the shop floor, it is not robots just replacing what human beings do, but to actually make human beings more effective and to provide a safer environment. That's what I believe will happen, but maybe my view is biased because I have a strong technology background.
Okay. John?
You know, there's a certain connection that can be made between free trade and the internet, in the sense that both are and should be and can be great levelers. The internet is something which some of our countries are having a more challenging time dealing with than others. But there's no doubt that the openness and the transparency that is created by the internet, and one would hope also the transparency that is created by free trade, complement each other in terms of growth and prosperity. So in the longer term, although in answer to your comments about the dislocations that occur with regards to whether it's NAFTA, CAFTA, TTIP, TPP, et cetera, the dislocations which occur, hopefully over time, are leveled out. And the dislocations are made to the benefit of those that are initially perhaps disenfranchised by the trade that does go on. There's no immediate zap or magic wand that occurs the minute a free trade agreement is signed. There's a huge process that goes on, a dislocation that goes on, which we all believe, I certainly believe, and I think you share that view with me, is ultimately beneficial for all of us, not only for the companies that are involved in it, but with regards to the social evolution of our various societies and how they benefit from it. I share the view that whether it's 3D printing or whether it's artificial intelligence or robotics, none of these are end games in themselves, rather like crushing atoms. They have an ongoing effect, which can in fact accelerate economic growth in ways that we haven't imagined. Who could have imagined in years gone by that we would have the internet? Again, going back to my life, I went to Stanford and was in Silicon Valley before it was Silicon Valley. Unfortunately, I missed the timing on that. I graduated in 1972. Had I been there 10 years later, that might have been different. But who could have imagined our lives without Silicon Valley, or the Silicon Valleys that have been created now throughout the world? So it remains to be seen with artificial intelligence and with robotics how the economies will be energized by that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kojima, you want to add about the innovation, the question about the innovation?
Yeah. Anyhow, I'll say innovation is very, very important for growth throughout the world, particularly in Asian countries for the innovation purpose. I insisted that the communication, collaboration together is very, very important to exchange, to change the ideas. And that is the point which I like to insist.
Okay. Pak James, the Nikkei also asking, are the free trade to increase about the business, investment, and so on?
Yeah.
It also can have your issue what you raised today.
I think so. I think free trade plus the technological disruptions is going to totally disrupt supply chain. And it is an excitement because I have a $1 trillion economy in Indonesia. And with free trade and technology, all of a sudden now I add the Philippines, 600 billion, I add Thailand, I add all these other places. So the opportunities are tremendous. But it will disrupt. And if nothing is done about it, you've got inclusive issues. And it is a real issue. You go out to outside of the urban cities, you know it is a problem. So I think if free trade goes on, technology cannot be held back, and nothing else is done about it, you got a problem. And the problem is, again, it's education. I think business have an opportunity. We know how to do a lot of things. We know that the graduates are not ready when they join our companies. We know that education system doesn't work as it stands today. We know, if we are ahead today, we know that education is not knowledge. but it's a process of learning, of creative thinking. And how do we apply that when it comes to training our employees? How do we think about going further? I mean, maybe the CSR I like better than those other things, about going out and making a difference. And our voice can be heard. So I think if we can do some of those things, we could take advantage of everything that's going on, but be more sustainable by addressing the issue. Yeah, but free trade will have problems. I look at the day when every day we'll have 50 planes from China carrying, I do not know, 20,000 people every day. They do not understand the Indonesian culture. They do not understand the Indonesian language. It's already starting to happen. They're going to the secondary and tertiary cities of Indonesia. They work 24 hours because there's no cost of their time. And our Indonesian people, it's a different culture. It's a very different culture. So something must be done about it.
Okay. Mr. Wang, you want to add something? Because time is limited.
Sure. I want to just respond to the free trade question. I think the trade has been basically the liberalization of the last several decades, particularly for China in the last 15 years, is enormous. And I remember before China joined the WTO, they said, oh, the wolf is coming. Going to bite, going to eat you, and then you're going to wipe out all your industry. After joining the WTO, China became the largest auto market in the world and several, largest market in the world. So I think what's going on now on RCEP or TPP, it's another upgrade of WTO, if you want to say so, and that probably going to continue to drive the reform on the knowledge, on the international property, intellectual property, and also the labor standards, and also the state enterprise reform. So in the long run, may not be regarded as a bad thing. I think the trade has to gone up, and also liberalizing the ushering the new driving force for that. I think that the trade for this region and for the world is really probably the cohesive glue of everything together, and making stability and prosperity. One thing I want to add is that I think probably in addition to the trade movement, we probably should add more talent movement actually. So we see China actually recently relaxed on the green card requirement. China has been entering agreement with USA on a 10-year multi-entry visa, with Australia, with Canada, with Syria, with Singapore. And so that probably is more important. China now is the largest student sending country in the world. Every year is 500,000 Chinese students going everywhere. And we see more foreigners coming to China. China become a new destination of immigrants to the world. So that kind of movement is also important for sustained trade. I think we need a new trade regime and upgrade it with the human touch, and with the technology, with the service economy, and also university and education. So that's probably the future for the region and the world prosperity.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ju, you want to add something? Yeah,
I'd like to add that I think we are all fearful of technology and free trade because it means change. But if you look back, take, for example, Singapore. You got on a bus in the old days, you had one driver, one bus conductor. Today, you have one guy. In the old days, you always had somebody manning the car park. Today, you just have a machine. And yet, we've had new industries pop up, funny ones like manicurists, people who just make money painting your nails, party planners, DJs. So with the demise of one industry, it doesn't mean that another can't come up. It's just that it's difficult to imagine at this point in time. The second thing is that the disruption will take a period of time. So it's very difficult. Over the long term, I think everybody is optimistic, assuming we have global peace. Over the short term, I think a lot of disruption, and it's very uncomfortable. But if you look at what's being done, again, I'm very optimistic, because governments are taking action. In fact, they're taking action on businesses, and some of us are not terribly happy because they're trying to manage this Gini coefficient. They're trying to retrain people. They're trying to manage real estate costs. They're trying to increase wages. And then they're imposing on companies CSR. So I think when you look at the whole balance, people are working to do something. And everybody, business, government, we're all mindful that if, as I think John said, if you allow this Gini coefficient to go too far, you're going to have massive instability. So on balance, I think you know, you have disruption, but you have people dealing with it, and I'm optimistic.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Chu. I'm sorry, John, because time is running. I have to discipline about the time. Yeah, I have to say sorry to the audience who doesn't have a chance to asking the question or argument. But because I have to discipline about the time is the balance only 47 seconds, not 47 minutes. Yeah, I have to conclude and closing this event with the word is I hope that will be agreed by all the panelists and all the audience. We agreed about now we are come to the edge of the what we call it the uncertainties. A lot of challenge, yeah. But as human being, we have to fix that challenge, yeah. So with that, we also see a lot of opportunity. Yeah. And how to get the opportunity is, of course, in the government, they have the homework, in the company, they have a homework, and also the social community, they have the homeworks to fix all the problem. But the issue is raised today is also important. I think the economic is not only about the profit, not only about the added value, but also about the social equality. Yeah, I think that is the words I can share to everybody. So thank you very much for all the panelists to a very interactive discussion today, and thank you very much for all audience. Thank you very much.